Let's start by defining net operating income. As I just mentioned, we calculate revenues and expenses to allow us to come to the ever important net operating income, or NOI. As we've already seen, the simple formula for NOI is revenue minus expenses. But what NOI really measures is the ability of a property's operations to create cash flow. And you see we have a really complicated technical definition here. If you're familiar with analyzing companies, NOI is similar to EBITDA in the sense that it ignores financing decisions and income taxes. If you look at the entire cash flow or P&L for a property, you'll see there are a number of costs after NOI, everything below here. These items are excluded because they're unrelated to the property's operations. You have things like capital expenditures, tenant improvements, and leasing commissions if we're talking about a commercial property. We have debt service, which has to do with our financing decisions. And if you were to think about this from the perspective of what is intrinsic to the property versus what is a decision that is made by the owner, the actual operations of a building are intrinsic to the property, whereas these decisions all have to do with who owns the property. One owner might say, I'm interested in investing a lot of capital into this building because it's going to help me raise the rents, while another may think that that's a pointless exercise and not invest any capital. Another owner might decide that, well, I want to put a whole lot of leverage on this building so that I can lower the amount of cash I have to invest, while another investor might be interested in owning this thing all cash, which would affect your debt service. So, again, NOI is really just focused on the cash flows that are intrinsic to the property. So let's take a second to talk about capital reserves. I mentioned it briefly when we were going through the operating expenses for the multifamily, but we didn't spend a lot of time on it. And so as is the theme with real estate, there is a caveat when it comes to capital reserves. Depending on who you ask, reserves can go below the line, as you see it here, or they can be included in expenses. It's often included in expenses by institutional investors as a way of underwriting more conservatively. Capital reserves are typically small dollars, so it's not super significant in the grand scheme of things. Capital reserves being above or below the line is never going to make or break a deal. We won't spend time discussing all of these items right now, as they're going to get their own attention in a later module.